the risk, Kwesi Millington.
Raise your hand if you've ever done something stupid. Okay, I'm in the right room. You'll understand then as you come back with me to when I was 7 years old. My mother and I walked into the Hudson Bay Company, and as I walked in, I could smell the perfumes in the air. And then I saw it. Standing in front of me like Indiana Jones's Holy Grail, a tall spinning stand full of sunglasses. Now imagine the scene. You know that I saw it. However, my mother, she also saw it. But knowing me, most importantly, my mother saw that I saw it. So she walked over to me, tall, lean frame, shot me a stern look and said, "Kwesi, don't touch it." Fellow Toastmasters and guests, I welcome you. Contest chair, I thank you. Parents in the room, I pity you. Especially if you are blessed to have a child like I was. Because you see, my mother may have said, "Don't touch it," but I only heard the last two words. Parents in the room, raise your hand if you know that sometimes children act as though commands are really just suggestions. Well, sure enough, as my mother turned her back, I turned my attention to the Holy Grail. And with the stealth of a ninja, I walked over. I gave it a little spin. And I thought, you know what? Something's not right. And then like a light bulb, it hit me. Raise your hand if you've ever watched Wheel of Fortune. Well, what does Pat Sajak tell his guests to do? Does he tell his guests, give it a little spin? No, no, no. He tells his guests, make sure you get behind that wheel and give it the biggest spin you have. And so I did. And if you had been there, you would have seen and heard sunglasses flashing everywhere. Just for a moment, I was as happy as a Toastmaster who didn't get picked for table topics. That moment didn't last, because my mother turned around. My daydream became a nightmare. My mother looked at the sunglasses on the ground. She looked at the sales clerk. The sales clerk looked at me as if to say, "Son, I'll pray for you." But the very worst thing was when my mother looked at me. Have you ever had your life flash before your eyes? Well, I assure you that even at 7, that can happen. On that day, I learned that my mother didn't believe in timeouts. I learned that sometimes risk does not always lead to reward. Sometimes it leads to a red rear end. And I learned that what they say on television is true. Don't try this at home. Or at the Bay. Or at Walmart. But just because it didn't work out for me doesn't mean that you should stop relishing the risk. Because let's face it, isn't it fun sometimes to have a conversation with that 7-year-old inside of your head? The one that's with you when you're in a swimming pool. Maybe you had too much to drink. The need for #1 hits. And you know you should get out of the pool and go to the washroom. But that inner voice says, you know what, just go. No one will see the yellow. Or guys in the room, guys, have you ever been driving in your car? Actually, you know what, ladies, have you ever been sitting beside your man in the car? And you know he didn't know where he was going. But guys, what do? We listen to the 7-year-old that says, you know what? Just drive. Who needs GPS? Or perhaps, have you ever been sitting at the dinner table and you learned the unfortunate rule, the rhyme that goes, beans, beans, the musical fruit. And you know that you should excuse yourself and go to the washroom. But that little voice inside says, you know what? You can just blame it on the dog. Aren't we all 7-year-olds at times? Life is about risk. Sometimes you have to fail in order to sail, sink in order to soar. Sometimes you have to risk losing in order to truly live. So leave here today and channel your inner 7-year-old. Now, I'm not saying to pee in a pool. Pretend you know where you're going. And I'm definitely not saying to blame it on Fido. But pick one thing that scares you, that may be silly, maybe even a little stupid. Because the best rewards in life come when you spin the wheel and relish the risk. So ladies, relish the risk. Fellas, relish the risk. Parents, well, if you're a parent, aren't you already relishing the risk? I'm just joking.